I mean, I feel like we hear it every year, but it was one for the record books, right?
Exactly right. 2024 was at the top of the class of years again. So it's a second consecutive year where we're saying it's the warmest year on record. 2024 actually was comfortably ahead of 2023, which in and of itself smashed the previous record.
And then, I mean, previous years going back 10, 20 years, they're making the list too, right?
Exactly. The last 10 years are all the 10 warmest years on record. So a pretty clear picture is showing up in terms of our warming trend on our planet.
So how is this data measured?
Right. So we have weather stations across the entire world, which are basically measuring temperatures in places like in Europe and Asia and Africa, South America, North America. And then on the ocean, we have buoys and we have ships that are all measuring temperatures. We can take all of that information, stitch it together, and then create a data set which allows us to make the claim, like we are, that 2024 was the warmest year on record.
And how long has this particular set of data been available? How long are these records available for going back?
So right. So at NOAA, our data set goes back 175 years to 1850. So we have a large data set and a huge amount of years, which allow us to make the claim again why this is so unbelievable that the 10 warmest years, that 175-year record, are all the last 10 years.
Okay, so that's global temperatures. What about the US?
The US also experienced its warmest year on record as well. So it's not necessarily the case every single time there's a warmest year on record that would also translate to also being the warmest year in the United States, but not this year. So USA was, again, number one here in 2024.
And then localizing even more, were there any spots across the country that stood out more so than others as being warm?
So the pretty much the entirety of the country, as you can imagine, in the year being the warmest on record for the United States, was above average, but particularly the northern tier of the United States, getting into the Northeast as well as Minnesota into the Great Lakes. It's the year being the warmest above average than any other place across the country. But in general, you pick a place across the United States and they experience a warmer than average year pretty much.
And I think, a lot of people know the answer to this, but you're an expert. You work for NOAA. We're talking to NASA. Why have we had the warmest years on record here over the past decade?
Sure. So the reason why we're seeing this warming trend is because of our emissions of greenhouse gases from the burning of fossil fuels. This is all consistent with climate change. And that's why we're seeing a continued trend upwards. Now, that does not mean that every single year is going to be the next warmest year on record, but it's the reason why we're seeing the last 10 years and the 10 warmest years on record, and why we're seeing this consistent trend over the last 40, 50 years.
So you're measuring with on-site data, but isn't there information coming in from satellites as well?
Exactly. We also have satellites which are able to monitor everywhere across our planet as well for things like temperature and precipitation. Those data sets are a little bit different than the ones we're talking about in terms of the global average, what we're looking at, but those are also incredibly important to be able to pinpoint where things are changing quicker because they have eyes everywhere, unlike a weather station or a buoy, which is only in one individual location.
Okay, so I'm a meteorologist. We're a weather show. We forecast weather. What can this tell us about the future of weather and climate?
Well, I think one thing it can say is that in the summertime and at other times of the year where we experience warm temperatures or hot temperatures, climate change is likely to make those temperatures even hotter. Heat waves last even longer. It also means that as temperatures rise, it might make it a little bit more difficult for snow to fall as opposed to rain. We know in the DMV, we tend to hug that rain snow line. So if you raise temperatures up, it always makes it a little bit more difficult to get snow. It doesn't mean we can't get snow, but it's certainly something you can take a look into. Also, when it comes to heavy rainfall events, a warmer atmosphere holds more moisture in it. So climate change is warming that atmosphere. It allows that a storm comes to wring out that sponge of our atmosphere, leading to there being more rainfall falling over a short amount of time. And we've seen that in years past, especially in this area, that can lead to flash flooding across the entire region. So those are other concerns that we can potentially see an increase in intensity of those sorts of events going into the future.
Certainly feels like we've had some wild weather already in 2025. I saw in your bio that you were involved in the UN Climate Change Conference. Can you give me any sort of feeling from what the rest of the world's thoughts are on this problem and how to solve it?
Right. So the one thing I would take away from COP29 is that the world is heading forward on dealing with climate change. Pretty much every country I talked to are discussing work that they were doing, and there's thousands and thousands of people are there all looking to tackle this problem of climate change. So every little person can do their own little thing, but it's also good to know that not only governments, but institutions and the private sector are all doing their part, or at least trying to do more to tackle this climate change issue.
That's hopeful. And also thinking about educating our youth is hopeful when it comes to the future and climate change, which, I got a press release not too long ago about NOAA having the very first ever animated show. And then I read your bio and found out you were the creative reason for this. Can you tell me a little brief bit here on that?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, NOAA released its first ever cartoon called Teak and Tom, and I'm the Tom. It's a 5-part animated series talking about how the oceans influence our weather and climate on our planet, how climate change is impacting our communities, and what we can do to help solve that problem. And I get to be a cartoon character, which is pretty much living a lifelong dream.
All right, I'll link it too in our YouTube video so that people can easily find it. Tom, is there anything else you want to add about the global temperatures?
No, I think we covered pretty much everything.
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. While you're here, check out some other videos you just may like.